With the launch of the Planet Zoo Barnyard Animal Pack, I've been busy building during the early access period and created brand new starter habitats for all of the new barnyard animals. A slight change in format for these habitats. Normally for the starter builds, I don't create walkthrough enclosures because for beginner players, managing the welfare of animals in walkthrough habitats can be a bit problematic to say the least. Personally, I've always regarded walkthrough habitats as a more intermediate endeavour, so something for more experienced players to consider. However, with the Barnyard Pack, having a walkthrough enclosure where you can set this up to enable the animal encounter experience is a fundamental element of the pack's gameplay. So deviating from my normal self-imposed starter habitat rules, all 7 of the starter habitats for this pack are walkthrough enclosures and all are set up ready for animal encounters. Let's take a look what we've got. First is the alpacas. You can keep up to 40 alpacas in a habitat, and the starter habitat I've created here for the alpacas is big enough to accommodate that many. With the breeding, the alpacas breed a little slower than some of the other animals in the Barnyard Pack, so it'll be a while before they're hitting the capacity limit in this enclosure. I did notice a lot of the alpacas prefer sleeping outside rather than in the hard shelter though, so might need some tweaking with the bedding in here if it's sunk too low into the floor or something. As with all the starter habitats, there's no enrichment items included in the blueprint, and I did also notice there isn't enough feeding stations in here to meet the full set of 40 alpacas requirements. So the keeper is dumping some additional food on the ground, but once you add enrichment feeder stations, that shouldn't be a problem. Next is the Alpine Goat. A little trickier to build this enclosure, the Alpine Goats have rock as part of their terrain paint requirement. With all of these starter habitats being walkthrough enclosures for this pack, I tried to keep terrain quite flat to avoid any issues with the navigation. However, it looked a little strange having rock terrain paint with no elevation, so I've added some elevation in this one. But I've balanced this out by only using small rocks to keep it fitting with a walkthrough environment. You can have up to 30 goats in a habitat, and this starter one here can accommodate all 30. Like with the alpacas, the breeding habit of the Alpine Goats is pretty tame, so I'd say you're safe to add plenty of goats to start off with for this one. Next is the American Standard Donkey. Not entirely happy with this habitat. I've used the Przewalski's horse starter habitat as a basis, and in hindsight, the donkeys may have benefited starting something from scratch. It meets all of their requirements, that's not an issue, but it feels a little too flat and empty set up as stables like this. Hey ho, I'm always on a tight timescale when creating the starter habitats to align with the launch of the new packs, so I don't have a lot of opportunity to second guess how something should look until after the fact. So yeah, it's a bit empty in here, but it does work and it does meet all requirements, so I think I'll live with it for now. Anyway, for the American Standard Donkey, you can keep 6 of these in a habitat, and this enclosure is plenty big for that amount. I found the donkeys to be the slowest breeders in the new pack, so no danger here of maxing out the space requirements. Next is the Highland Castle. I was surprised with how small the cattle are, and that's reflected in the space. Before building the habitat, I'd assume the cattle would need a lot more space than they do. You can have up to 20 Highland cattle in one enclosure, and I feel like the space to accommodate this is pretty lenient. I've made this big enough to house all 20, and I'd say it's big enough to handle a lifespan of breeding with the cattle too. Something different for the cattle, I've created a new hard shelter design. This is made entirely of painted wood and a metal roof, and I've separated the inside slightly with the metal fencing, making sure the openings are wide enough for the cattle to navigate through. I know with the starter habitats you can't really make these look realistic, but I do try where possible to make it look in theming. Next habitat is the Radnor Sheep. You can keep 50 sheep in a habitat, and in the short space of time I've been building for the Barnyard Pack, the sheep breed pretty quickly. So with this one, I can't say there isn't a danger of the herd outgrowing this enclosure. I'd be wary and watch the breeding if I were you when you're using this one, because I think if you start this one out with all 50 sheep, then there quite possibly could be a danger of maxing out here with too many sheep. This is the largest habitat I've created for the Barnyard Animal Pack. The sheep originate from Wales, and I felt this was almost too easy for me to create a habitat that reflects the natural environment. There's a new hedgerow that I think has been added with this pack. I struggle to remember all the base game plants, so I'm assuming this is new. Anyway, I've used a lot of this across the new habitats for the farm ambience, and I think it works well with this habitat as a barrier border. Just be careful with the hedge. If you sink it into the ground at all, some of the animals are able to navigate over it and escape, as I discovered with a bit of a chicken run style escape event that happened whilst I was building for the chicken habitat. Which brings us nicely to the next habitat, Sussex Chicken. My idea originally for this habitat had visions of building a set of small chicken coops dotted around the habitat, capitalising on the chicken's small size and ability to navigate into smaller spaces. However, on seeing that you can have up to 80 chickens in a habitat and seeing how quickly they breed, I realised that small hard shelter coops idea just wasn't practical. That would accommodate 10 to 20 chickens at best, so instead I've opted for a large communal barn, which is now the main feature of this habitat. This whole habitat can easily accommodate 80 chickens, but be warned, chickens breed like crazy and they do it very quickly. They're like the peafowl, but there's 80 of them starting out. The large barn is a necessity, but even this will struggle to keep up with a full set of breeding chickens, so good luck with that. Last habitat I've created for the Barnyard Pack is the Tamworth Pig. I won't lie, this was a super easy habitat to pull together. The pigs need very little space, and even this small enclosure provides more room than they need. It looks sparse right now, but in terms of foliage, there's not a lot you can add for the pigs. They like soil and lots of it. At least it leaves a lot of room for adding enrichment items as they're unlocked. So that's all 7 starter habitats I created for the Barnyard Animal Pack. They're available to download now from the Steam Workshop. There's a link in the description to that. Enjoy and let me know what you think of them. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.